Thank you very much for joining us, Mark. Would you like to introduce yourself and what you're going to be talking about today?
Well, sure. I was born at a young age. My parents' name was no, just kidding. I won't go into the whole life story. I'm an executive. My name's Marc Pitman. As you can see on the screen, I'm an executive coach who is Franklin Covey trained. Been doing coaching leaders formally for 20 years, informally for about 30. We have My wife and I have always found we gravitated to leaders, and we thought we were cheating because leaders were so much fun. For example, we worked at a boarding school as faculty, and the student leaders were some of the most fun for us to work with. And we really thought we must be doing something wrong because work is supposed to be hard, and the leaders are probably the people that don't need the help. But as we started pressing into that a little bit more, we realized leaders in our Western structure, leaders, the higher up you go, the less cover you get. And so student leaders at the school, just like adult leaders in organizations, were kind of trusted with, here, you're capable, take this. And they were given no supervision. So we get to translate, so we get to be that kind of safe space for them to think. All of a sudden, the decisions that they had to make had more import than ever before, but they had less input. So we've been doing that. My area of expertise has been nonprofit fundraising. I've raised millions of dollars for various nonprofits, both in the education and healthcare sector. And then my first book came out in 2008 called Ask Without Fear. That's helping also around the globe. It's led to a lot of education around the globe. And in that space, I just have gotten to be with leaders. And what I'll share with you today has birthed out of that. The Surprising Gift of Doubt it took me about 20 years to write because I couldn't explain what I did as an executive coach. Unfortunately, this content, this map structure that I'll show you, and we'll look at values also, how values play into that as you're thinking about going through your career or your entrepreneurial journey. And I will be doing my best to monitor the chat. Carol or Hannah, please jump in. I firmly believe it's more important to have this closer to a dialogue, even though I can keynote and monologue, no problem. I don't want someone to get stuck with a question at one point
Sure.
and miss out on the rest of the information.
Sure.
But as long as it's okay for me to say, we'll get to that.
Yeah, no problem at
Okay,
all.
great.
So guys, just put any questions in the chat as you go through, and me and Hannah will keep our eye on that for Mark.
Super. All right, if I get started with
Yes,
the
please
slides.
do.
Okay, sweet. I will share my slides.
I'll put myself on mute because I have two noisy dogs. But give me a second if you need me. I'll come back in.
Okay. And I do not, I think I do have the chat window open. Great. I'll put you all at the top there. Super. So you can see that Surprising Gifted Out. Great. That's right. You're on mute. I can see you shake your head though. Thanks, Carol. Super. So one of the things that is surprising to me is that leadership is so stressful. We get into this space of going through life, and we think that the more further up we get, the more easy things will get, and it doesn't ever seem to do that. And then you can throw into the mix something like a global pandemic. One of the benefits I think we have coming at this point in the pandemic is that leaders, hopefully, I hope people don't go back to the way it was, but remember that moment where collectively there was a collective ignorance of, we've never been this way before. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what the future is. I remember looking at my team and my business and just thinking, I don't know if anybody's ever going to buy executive coaching or training again, because we've never experienced this before. So the stress of that, and for leaders in particular, where people are expecting them to have the answers, can be incredibly debilitating. But in part, that's because we don't know there's a map for leadership. And one of the amazing gifts of having coached so many leaders over the years is that I've been able to see this map. So if you're listening to this in the replay, please keep your hands on the wheel if you're driving. But if you're not, you can put a vertical line on a piece of paper, and at the top it's confident, at the bottom it's unsure, and then the horizontal line is your line of inputs. And so on the left, put external, and on the right, put internal. this is the framework that we'll be building the rest of this kind of training over. I shared this. I don't know if any of you have had the experience of sharing something, one of your creative thought processes with a friend, and they said, "Where did you get this from?" But I shared this with my wife, and she said, "So who did you get this from?" She thought it was, she's like, this what I'm going to show you. She said, "This maps my journey in this particular field of expertise, and this maps my journey in this other field of expertise." So I knew I was onto something when this happened, when I was able to formulate this a few years ago. The problem with this map is that we usually only get half the map. We don't know the map exists, and we only get about half. So we start out in quadrant 1, where we're confident and we're having external communications or inputs. We are given some form of leadership. Somebody trusts us to run a team or oversee a project, and we get so excited about that because, well, there's two sets of leaders. There's the leaders that are more or less feeling like, finally, somebody knows I can do this. They see this in me. And then there's the other set of leaders that doesn't really have confidence in themselves, but has confidence at least in the people that are putting them into that position. Right? Well, at least Carol sees this in me. I don't see this, but at least she does, and I want to do the right thing for her. So what we normally do in our leadership journey is we start copying other people. We see parents lead, we see coaches lead, we see faculty members, teachers lead, and we try to do what we like about what we've seen them do. There is nothing wrong with that at all, but that is debilitating if that's all you do. The biggest problem is the motivational speakers I used to listen to would say that if you're a leader and you turn around and there's no one following you, you're just out for a walk. That's what happens so often with leadership. We do what we've seen other people do, and somehow it just doesn't work for us. Great example could be an introvert leader following an extrovert leader. The extrovert would be out there with people and loving chaos and not minding not having all the answers and getting energized by the creativity and the uncertainty. But an introvert leader gets incredibly drained by that. They need to have boundaries. They need to have expectations, and they may prefer to have written communication instead of verbal communication face-to-face at first, maybe initiating it with writing. And if they just try to copy the extrovert, they're going to feel like they're totally not cut out for this job. That just hits your confidence. And so you start moving down that slide, the scale to the unsure part. And this is where you hit quadrant 2. Call it the experiment quadrant. This is where you notice there are gaps in what you've got to offer, and you try to get it fixed. You try really, really hard to get it fixed. And these aren't bad things. You could take classes, you could get certificates, you could get degrees, you could read books, listen to podcasts. There's all sorts of different areas where you think, well, maybe I have a time management problem. So well, most of you have your screens off, but for those of you who have the screens on, have you listened to or read Getting Things Done? That book? No. Okay. So I back in the day, there was a book by David Allen called Getting Things Done. And people to this day, it's almost like a cult. They call themselves GTDers. The idea is that you have all the stress in your head because all the things are in your head. And as a leader, if you were to spend a few days and write everything you have to do in all areas of your life into paper, you'd have more peace because you knew where the stuff was. So you didn't have to keep it all in your head. And you write it down, and then you put it into different project files, and you write down not just the task, but also what's the next action step, so that when you have the opportunity to go back to that task or to that project, you can know what the next action step is and pick up much more quickly than sometimes happens when you look at a list and you can't remember whatever was on there. Now, personally, I love a good list. I love even putting things on the list that I've already done so I can cross them off as I go through my day. But getting things done didn't work for me. And in quadrant 2, this is a quadrant 2 example of learning. I looked at this book, and the book cover said, "Oh my goodness, this book changed my life. I am such a better leader. I'm more at home, peace with my family and my friends. Thank you, David Allen, for the intervention, all this." For me, I didn't get that. One thing I did get was the task list with the next project. What's the next action that needs to be taken? That was revolutionary for me, but that was maybe 10% of this book. For those of us that are in quadrant 2, which is where most of us spend our lives, we start feeling like I must be even more broken than I knew, because even now, I can't even get this. The book cover says everybody loves this book, and this format's changed their lives. And I only took 10% away. My lack, my gap, my deficits are so much greater than I ever knew. So we just kind of lurch from fix to fix, from program to program, from core, and organizationally this works too. This is where, if you've ever been in an organization, or you will as you continue to go through your career, some organizations will have sort of a plan of the month or a plan of the year. And they're all excited about this management plan of the year. They learn a new vocabulary, they have a balloon drop, they wear new t-shirts, and then the next year it's a new one. And it's that kind of lurching, trying to find the fix. It feels good for a moment, but then you still see what's wrong. What I have found is that if you're feeling like you're there, like there must be so much broken and wrong with you, you could be right. And there's a lot of tools to help for that. There's therapy, there's coaching, there's a lot of tools. It could also mean that you're on the verge of greatness, because that doubt, this is where the gift of that doubt, that niggling inner critic that feels so debilitating and feels like it's mocking you, might actually push you over into the other quadrant, starting to listen to, why am I, if I consistently miss certain things, what if I'm not broken? What if I'm bringing a unique perspective to this space? What if my solution that I see is unique for this problem? What if it's exactly the right voice this sector needs to hear? That's where you move into quadrant 3. Quadrant 3 is a magical place because, and it's a scary place because there's usually no guides. This is where you start sifting things. Instead of quadrant 2 is where you get your suit coat. Like if you're wearing a blazer, you just kind of get it off the rack. Quadrant 3 is where you visit a tailor and measure it and have it all custom fit for yourself. You start looking through the people you've copied and looking through the programs you've learned from, and you start wondering, what are the parts I take away, instead of judging yourself for all the parts you forget. And you start thinking about how is this different? And you learn to have a language for that. You learn to figure out, what are your values? What are your goals? There's a whole set of tools in here that we'll look at. I'll give you a brief overview of those tools and look in depth at one of them. But as you start doing that and start being able to have vocabulary and lived experience around why you may not be broken, but you may be just leading in a different way, your confidence goes back up and you move into the focus quadrant, which doesn't mean blissful nirvana, no more problems, life is great, and angels are playing lutes on clouds. It means that you have focus because you know the full map. You're no longer stuck to the half that you only saw before. You're able to know, okay, I'm facing a situation now. Do I need to move into quadrant 1 and start finding some more different people to follow and copy? Or should I look into quadrant 2 to think about what programs I might need, what learning I might need to do? Or am I in quadrant 3? Maybe the problem is that I've had a lot of input and I'm trying to copy other people's stuff, but there's a different way that I'm going to process this. And you have the tools to do that. You can also look at your team as you're building your team. You can see what journey they're in and help them be in the best part of that journey, because quadrant 1 is so important. It's important to copy and observe other people because you learn who's trustworthy and who's untrustworthy. You learn that not everybody's safe to follow. And you learn that some people do certain things well, but then have their lives falling apart around them. So you get to sift through, how do I want to follow people? What are the tells that I'm looking for when I'm trying to follow someone? Quadrant 2 is great because you learn how you learn. Some of you are going to be listening to this only as a recording on audio, and you're going to retain it. Some of you are going to be wanting to see the visual. Some of you are readers more, so you wish this were a book. Good news, it is. But you learn how you take in information and how your team takes in information, because as a leader, you need to be able to shift that. If you have a lot of people coming to you, giving you verbal, calling you up, doing quick things in Slack or something that sounds more verbal, they may process information through their ears better than through their eyes. So when you have these long emails, they may not be hearing them, even though you've clearly painstakingly laid everything out. So you might want to follow up with a way that they learn more easily. Quadrant 3, again, is the magical place, because that's where we all learn to put it together. And we learn that maybe the stuff that is nobody else is doing is something we have to offer to the sector. Maybe it's not. There's a lot of good stuff that other people are doing that are benchmarking and reports and studies that are really good to input. So I'm not saying throw that all out. I'm just saying, let's weigh that in balance with the internal cues, because most of our life, we're told not to listen to the internal cues. We're told we have to look at the data, we have to look at the external stuff. We can't deal with the soft things of feelings. And so quadrant 3 is where you start wondering, well, maybe my full lived experience is telling me something and leading to the way I do leadership. So let's look at the third quadrant, quadrant 3. This is the 3 big areas in quadrant 3 are hardwiring your identity, which is your story, and how you set goals. Hardwiring, the way I do it, you look at, there's 3 different levels of hardwiring. There's the ability hardwiring, where you are just what you're naturally good at. One of the assessment I use is the Highlands Ability Battery. It's about a 3-hour test of seemingly stupid tasks under time pressure. And it shows 19 different skills that just come really quickly to you. Your ability to match numbers, random numbers with normal letters, and your ability to see objects that are no longer, and remember objects that were once on a picture and aren't on a picture again. So those are the things that just innately come quickly to you. The next level is behavior hardwiring. This is where most of us kind of enter into hardwiring experiences with teams, things like DISC. Some people like Myers-Briggs, but DISC is the one I find most helpful. DISC, or single caloric, melancholy, phlegmatic. It's another 4-quadrant thing. Are you aggressive or reserved? Are you people-centered or task-centered? What's nice about behavior-based hardwiring is that you can see that in other people. So you're able to say, that guy on the screen talks really quickly. I bet he's more aggressive than he's reserved. And you can adjust your behavior. You can adjust your behavior differently for that, so that you can shift and try to speak the dialect of the person you're talking to. So we've had ability hardwiring, behavior hardwiring. The third type of hardwiring, though, is the motivation hardwiring. You may be fast-paced, but why are you fast-paced? And for myself, for the last 30 years, I found the Enneagram to be particularly helpful with this. It gives 9 different types of stories that people interpret the world through, and how to be successful in the world. And why I like that is it's harder for leading teams, because you can't give somebody else a number. You can see somebody being really aggressive, but you can't, and goal setting and all, but there could be 3 different ways. If those of you who know the Enneagram, they could be a 3, 7, or an 8. But the motivation behind it is very different. So that's why I like, as leaders working on ourselves, figuring out, why do we do the things we do? I notice I always am driving myself this way. Is that healthy? Is that unhealthy? And you get to be in this self-reflective state that helps you to grow, which leads you into your story, your identity. That is where what are the things you say to yourself? How do you talk to yourself? What's your inner critic saying on a regular basis? What are the ways that you introduce yourself in a group? What are the ways you try to help people categorize you? Those are kind of the scripts that we run, or the code that we put into our program as a human being. And unreflectively, they could be self-sabotaging us. There could be things that we put in there that are actually holding us back. And so when we start looking at our story, you can also see, you can start choosing, well, is this serving me anymore? This served me for a while. Maybe it's time for me to stop telling that story. Goals, there's a whole lot of books on goals, which are really good. But one of the things that I have found with our goal setting process, most leaders tend to silo their goals for whatever situation they're in. Pre-pandemic, I had people fly here to Greenville, South Carolina, and do a whole intensive day on using some of these tools. And goal setting was one of them. It was really interesting, because I challenge people to write 100 things that they want to do in a year, because it forces you to get out of your logical and into this like weird, like, I don't know, I'll just throw these things on there. And invariably, I'd have, after about 5 minutes of it, leaders would quietly, almost embarrassingly, call me in, and CEOs would say, is it okay that I put playing more with my kids on this list, on my list? And I'd smile and look, it's your list. It's totally okay. I know your business sent you here, but this is a list for you. This is how you set goals. So I find when we include our whole person in our goal setting, we can be more focused in whatever situation we're in, because we're not thinking about the things we're not doing. So when we're at work, we can be at work because we're not thinking about, oh, am I leaving my community relationships or my family relationships or friends should I be working more with them? And when we're in other situations, we can leave work where it is, because we know that our goals are in line with our objectives. The overlapping areas are your personal style, how you carry out what you do, your mission, why you're on this planet, what you want to do here, and then your values. we'll look at values. That's the one we'll go into in this for the remainder of this time. When you pull that all together, I say that you're working in integrity because everything is integrated. Your gears are all firing, you're firing on all cylinders because you have this kind of quiet confidence that comes from, yeah, I may not look like everybody else, but I understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I understand why my team is doing it this way. Some of you that are leading teams may see that organizationally, this can work as well. I've gone into organizations and had amazing conversations around what is the organization's identity? What are the stories that the staff are telling internally to each other? And are they helping or not? One organization was had a lot of first-time employees that would churn out after 3 to 6 months, which is expensive, and it's demoralizing to the staff because the story the staff was telling themselves was, we can't keep talent. We must be an awful culture here because we can't keep talent. And just being able to reflect on that for 45 minutes or so during a day training, they were able to turn that around to, what if it's not that we can't keep talent? What if we're a training ground for new employees? These people have never worked for an organization before, and maybe we're helping show them what it is like to work in an artificial environment where there are things you have to do that you don't like to do. And we're not family because it's a job. There are certain requirements for that. It totally changed their storytelling and help them to do their onboarding more intentionally and to not beat themselves up over the fact. And this is after we had done the look to see what are the toxicity. Are they toxic? Is it a toxic culture? So we weren't burying any systemic toxicity or inequity in that way. So this integrity model is the heart of quadrant 3. And what I want to do, one of the things that I wanted to think about for you all is that the idea that small compromises lead to big change. Many people start their lives feeling like they know who they are and they know what they're about. And then they start getting into life and they start making these small decisions, paying rent, maybe having a committed relationship. Different things just kind of draw them away from the intensity of the things that they value. And before they know it, they're decades into their life and they're just not living the person that they were early on in their career doesn't look like or wouldn't recognize the person that they become. The analogy I've often heard is an airplane on course. If an airplane stays on course, has a destination it wants to get to, it'll get there. But if it just leaves a few degrees off, it'll end up thousands of miles away from where it's supposed to be. And that's not necessarily bad. We're always growing and evolving, but unreflective, it can be incredibly shocking for people to realize, who am I? What have I become? So that's why I wanted to look at values. Values, has anybody here done it? And you could say in the chat if you have, has anybody here done a values inventory before? There we go. Okay, Carol has. The values inventory was one of these simple tools, and we'll share it with you in a second. But why I like values, it's like you're kind of straddling a fence on so many decisions in life. And you've got the ability to put your weight down on one area or the other a little bit more. And the values help you do that so you can make quicker decisions that are centered, but they don't necessarily feel logical. Like, I don't know exactly why we're going to do this, but I don't know what the outcomes are going to be, but I know we're committed to our staff. So whatever decisions we make in this next session, we're going to try to be really transparent and honest with our staff and carry them. To me, they're like the keel of a ship. I'm not nautical. Maybe some of you are, but fortunately the Encyclopedia Britannica had a good summary on that. And you can see the link there. Like the keel of a ship, values are what are in the backbone. They run straight down the center. The entire ship is built off of them, the structure. And all this, as you can see in the picture on the screen, there are a variety of ships, but they all have a keel. There are a variety of human beings, a variety of lived experiences and aspirations, but we all have a value structure that kind of acts as a compass, helping us to, with connectivity and giving us, whether we know it or not, the input for how we make decisions. And none of those, it's not good or bad. The fact that you may value one thing and your colleague or friend values something else doesn't mean one's better than the other or worse. It's just a different value, different keel, a different person. So what I love to do is be able to help us see them. Because my experience too was when I did a value study for my Franklin Covey coach training 20 years ago, I found independence was one of my core values. It just jumped out off the page at me. And it made me realize why teamwork always seemed a little bit draining, a little bit hard. There are times where I could commit to being on a team, but it started at that point in my career. I started looking for, if I value independence, what are job opportunities that I could do to still be productive, still feed my family, and honor that value of mine. And that's why I chose a coaching and speaking and writing route versus being on a team. I'm not saying anything about people that are on teams. We need people on teams. It just wasn't life-giving for me. And so I was able to more honestly reflect that. And also when I was on teams and when I am on teams, I'm able to more honestly remind myself, okay, I'm going to have to tone back this core value because this team is more important than my desire for independence. So I'm going to have to give up some of that independence. Carol, I'm not sure how we'll deliver this, but I've got a values inventory I'd like to give everybody and have it with the recording. It's just a PDF, and it has the directions on the first page. You can see that I have personal values on one side and personal values, you can do it in organizational values. And then the other side is a bunch of words there. And the one I do, it's adjectives, adverbs, gerunds. So it annoys some people grammatically. There are plenty of other values inventories on the web. If you just Google values inventory, you'd find a lot. But you look at those, and what I recommend is doing is looking at them three different settings. Looking at them like when you're in a space of study or work, and just kind of putting dots next to the words that kind of resonate with you. And then looking at them when you're in a more relaxed space or maybe on the weekend, whatever your weekend is, and then put dots next to them and just reflect at different places in your life to see what are the ones that keep coming up. And then circle the values that seem to have the most dots next to them. You'll probably find them with that there are some there that embarrass you but they're very core to you. So be open to that and don't let yourself be embarrassed by them, because your gift, where your joy is that passion that can really change the world, because not everybody has that joy or passion or desire to be that. And so that could be a part of your unique offering to the world. And then you could also do it for organizational values. I get to do this with for a conference that I help run here in the United States. And it was fascinating because when we pulled everybody together, we had people reflect on what their experience was going through this. And they said, well, the personal values were interesting because I couldn't get 10. And that's fine. It's better to narrow it down. Some leadership folks say it's better to narrow it down to 3 to 5. But I couldn't get 10. So that was one thing. But then when it came to organizational values, I didn't know what they really were. I had no clue what my organizational values were. And all of a sudden they started understanding, oh, that's why I'm feeling this stress at work, because I have even on Examine, I have values, and there's a disconnect between where my work environment is. Fortunately, we're seeing now as we move in our work environments that staff and employees are willing to walk if their values aren't being lined up. And so as leaders, that's one of the things that I love living in a fishbowl. I love it that when people are actually able to see, are we in integrity internally with what we say externally? So I think it's going to be very healthy for our organizations, because we're not going to be able to slide by as organizations that say one thing and live another. I think that's going to be good. But if you're in a stressful situation, sometimes it may be your organizational values are out of alignment with your own values. And so then you choose, is it worth being here and putting up with that stress? Or is it better for me to find a place that's more in line with my values? So I'll email that, Carol, to you, this PDF for you all to have. It's available free also if anybody wants it on my website. The direction, and I'll email you a PDF of these slides too. The directions are right here so that you can do that. And I won't read those again because you all can see that or look at it later. So this is the surprising gift of doubt. This is one of the if anybody's wondering, I guess I did put the slides here. I mean the words here. So just out of curiosity, for those of you listening, just you can jump in on chat. What or watching, what words jump out to you? I know competition jumps out to me. You can either unmute or type it into chat either way. Research and knowledge. It's really interesting. Facilitate. Nice. Invent. Honesty and fulfillment. Nice. Friendships. Danger. That's cool. Create, but it's not on this list. Good. Analyze. See, all of a sudden you can just see in the chat, there's all sorts of different things that different people value. And we need that. We need people that like danger and want to take risks. And we also need people that are maybe erring on the side of stability and systems. And so I love that all the different ones there. That's really cool. One of them, research and knowledge. I found out there's one of the tests that in the hardwiring section, I had a coach last year have me take the Kolbe test, Kolbe, and it turns out I'm the 4-part. It was confusing to me, but the way she articulated it was I'm a fact finder, quick start. So like that research, I wanted to go deep. When we moved to the United States South, I'd never lived here before. So I started trying to figure out the culture by studying 1860 history, Civil War history and post and Reconstruction history, which apparently isn't normal. You don't most people move to a community and they look to see like what are the Yelp reviews of different things, different restaurants. I was going back 150 years, but I also have this quick start ability to just when I'm on a committee or something, I want to take action right away and get stuff done. So knowing that has helped me to with some of the frustrations, some people that may not do that too. And then Carol says, teaching, learning, innovation, creation, fun, family, and kindness. Awesome. My friend Brant Mansoir wrote a book called Black Sheep Values. He talks about how apparently in herds of sheep, there are a few that have black hair, and those are the ones that can't be undyed or they can't be dyed. Their wool can't be dyed, but they help the rest of the flock figure out where the flock is going because they're the ones that the rest of the flock can see. And so his book on Black Sheep Values helps you go through them and then helps you to figure out and encourages you to figure out, feed your flock, feed your principles every day so that your values are being invested in, and then connecting with the people you work with through their values. So that when you're trying to say something that in your terms of your dialect, you're actually able to communicate and connect it with the values and the flock of the other people around you. So that's awesome. Thanks for playing with that. That's very cool. Why I like this is, as I said before, values are like a compass. They're, and I want to really reiterate the right or wrong part. Some of us are brought up in faith traditions that say certain things are right and certain things are wrong. And so we feel out of balance when we value something that our community or our culture doesn't like. And that may not necessarily be wrong. It just may be out of sync with the people that we're around, which isn't a values judgment. The interesting thing about core values, as Brant Mansoir teaches them, is that they don't change. So I've had values that have changed at different seasons in my life, but what Brant's argument is that core values versus aspirational values, because core values, you can look back on your history and see, oh yeah, I did this way. I have stories about the values that I've done. So that's something that if you've done some values inventory work before, maybe you can tie in the identity part of the quadrant 3 model with that as well. And I love the values stuff because when chaos hits, we all go into different ego states. Eric Berne had a thing called transactional analysis. And his premise was, in any situation, we have 3 different ego states we can bring to the interaction, and the person that we're talking to also has those 3 ego states. We have a parent, adult, and the child. And what we don't want to do is we don't want to cede our authority as a leader and just say, would you please give me my allowance to the parent figure of that other person? But we also don't want to start domineering in the negative parent way and saying, you should do this and you should do that. If you start hearing yourself saying should to other people, if you're shooting on other people, that may be an indication that you're feeling this desire to just direct and dominate in the transactional analysis way. And speaking to the child part of the person that you're talking to, what we want to do as leaders is talk adult to adult. And I find centering ourselves in our values can actually help us recenter in ourselves. And then we can't force the other person to be an adult to us, but we try to speak to the other person's adults as we go through our leadership journey. And with that, that's an introduction to quadrant 3, which is part of the entire surprising gift of doubt. Hopefully it goes from that stress feature place to one of joy, where we're able to actually know why we're doing things differently and know why that's delightful. And when people say everybody else is doing this, why are you doing that? We have some of the ways to explain and welcome people into that difference too, which gives us both a roadmap and a compass. Great. I'm open to questions. This is a book, as Gary and Carol know, it was nominated for the Business Book Awards in the UK, which is quite an honor. And I also have a coaching certification that I've been running for the last year on this. But I'm open to questions. Does this resonate? Does this not resonate? And Carol, I'll email those to you in just a minute.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Mark. Yeah, I think values are very important, and it's something that you're not really taught to think about. They just inherently happen to you when you develop your values throughout childhood and adulthood, until somebody actually asks you the question, so what are your values? And you're like, I don't really know. But it's really important to think about them, because they could be helpful or not helpful to your life. You might have a value of I don't know, you picked up from your parents that the only way to be heard is to shout loudest.
Sure.
That was something I picked up from my dad. He was very combative. He never let anybody walk over him. You were frightened of him, not like physically frightened of him,
Okay.
but in business you wouldn't mess with him. And that got him a certain level. However, I've found that actually in life you get more out of people by being nice to them than by fighting with them. And so, I decided that I would adjust that value, which I used to have, of being bolshy and aggressive, and turn it into something a bit gentler that might get me further. So, but you don't really think about these things until somebody says, hang on a minute, what are your values? Which is generally done, for me anyway, it was at Yellow Pages, which used to be ITT World Directories, when I was on a leadership course, surprisingly enough.
That's interesting. I remember Yellow Pages.
Yeah, it used to be.
And that's something in leadership too that I have found. People, we get so good in the first part of we get promoted in different positions or different places because of our ability to solve problems, but that doesn't keep us as leaders. That's when we start being micromanagers. When we start solving the people that are reporting to us, we start solving their problems. And that's when we get in the way. And so that can be really disorienting, to be able to think about all the stuff that brought me success is no longer keeping me there. And that's where the coaching skills come in well. And that's where the self-reflection of knowing, why do I always seem to go this way? When, what other options are there? Like you were saying with it brought him to one place of success, your dad.
Yeah.
That's good.
I think it's a really important conversation to have with yourself as well. And also the other thing that I love, and that's so true, is whatever brought me right here will not get me to the next place. And that's something that people just don't get. They just keep doing stuff, but the stuff that you do currently is getting you everything that you've currently got in your life. Wherever you are, it's because of the decisions that you've made, the choices that you've taken, the thinking that you have right now. And if you want to get to some other place, then all those things need to change, potentially. The choices you make, the way you make decisions, the way you think, all needs to change.
And it's scary to do that. There's a weird piece of certain things you need to come back to. Like there are certain basics, like if you're in sales, prospecting and follow-up are just, you have to keep at it. Even if there's a flashy new thing about some gizmo that's supposed to change your sales, it's usually human interactions and connecting with people. And oftentimes if we get a level of success, we may fall off some of those basics. But I was just listening to my coach, Pam Slim. She just posted on LinkedIn the other day that what she finds for a lot of high achieving leaders is their default is I've got to do more. I've got it. And that's what leads to incredible burnout for many of us of, if this has gotten me this far, more will get me further. Where at some point in some seasons of life, it's less.
It's less.
Doing less,
It's not
much more
more.
focusedly.
It's just different.
Yeah.
Different.
Yep. So
it's something I struggle with a lot because I am a control freak. I'm not as much as a control freak as my business partner, Gary.
Who isn't here to defend himself?
He would argue that he's not a control freak at all.
But it's not control. He's just right, probably, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That is correct. So I know I am, and I do try to walk the fine line between delegation and abdication. And sometimes it goes to abdication because I'm like, they've got this, and then suddenly, and then I think, maybe they haven't, maybe they need a bit more. So
and maybe this can give compassion for some of the leaders that you all are following too, or bosses that you have, because most people don't wake up in the morning thinking about how can I be crappy to my team? How can I be awful to my employees? Many bosses are really scared. There's all of a sudden they're in a position. I had a mentor that used to tell me the view is always different from the captain's chair. And every time he was promoted to another level of authority, he started having a habit of going back over his previous last 3 months or 3 years, apologizing to leaders that went before him, because he was just seeing a part. And every time he got promoted, he would see a wider horizon and realize, oh, that was a stupid decision based on my knowledge in my department, but organizationally, there were other things at play. And so I think apologizing is
it's a bit like becoming a parent. You don't really get how your mom was with you and why she was the way she was with you until you're a parent, and then you're like, sorry, mom.
Sorry, I called my dad up. I'm 50
terrible
now.
Teenager. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm 50 now. At 45, I called my dad up. My kids are now all 17 and above, 17, 20, and 22. About 5 years ago, I called my dad up, and I didn't say who I was. And I guess in the day of cell phones, he knew anyway, but I just said, were you just making it up as you went along? He started laughing because I thought he had it all figured out. I thought he knew what he was doing. He was dad. He seemed to have a plan and seemed to be working well.
Yeah,
so
I know. You just have to, so that helps you being a mom yourself, to just bite your tongue sometimes, because sometimes teenagers are absolutely insane, aren't they? I know I was completely insane, used to do all sorts of stuff that could have got me really, dead sometimes, and as a parent now, before I say anything to my kids, because I'm like, why are you making that decision? I'm like, no, hang on a minute. They're more sensible than you were at that age. So just shut up and go a different way. Choose a different approach. Don't be your dad. Don't be your dad.
For me, a lot of what I've had to do, and if sorry for all the that may not be have kids ever, but that we're going this route, but what I've had to do is it's their story. That's what I have to keep telling myself. It's not my story anymore, and the decisions they're making with the best choices that they have, and at this point, they're all young adults.
Yeah. I know, scary.
And they're great. They're so much more fun. There's so much. Kids, people are so much more fun as they progress. So
that's true. I agree with that. Brilliant.
Thanks, Grace, for your comments. I appreciate that. I'm glad it really resonated with you. Abby, it was nice to see your family back there. I hope that or the little one I waved to. I don't know if
that's my adopted granddaughter, Mark.
she seemed
delighted.
very the delight was popping off the screen. It was great.
Well, thank you again for your time today. As soon as I get that stuff from Mark, we'll get it uploaded onto the website along with Mark's video, so you can go back to that, you can watch it again, you can download the document, fill in your own values, spend a bit of time thinking about what they are, and you know, you can't get this wrong. Okay. It's not like, oh, I can only have 6, or, oh, I've got 15, or, you know, I should have this or I should have that. No, just get rid of those little voices in your head and think about what they really are. And they do change. They change throughout life, and that's okay too. Thank you,
I've,
Mark.
you're welcome. I've emailed those to you in the slides. I actually added a bonus section on goal setting. So if you all want to look
Nice.
at the slides, there's the goal setting system, an outline for that in there as well.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.